The clinking of champagne glasses echoed through the golden-lit ballroom. Beneath a crystal chandelier, a woman in a plain black uniform stood still, gripping a silver tray. Her eyes didn't lift, but everyone else's did, toward the man in the center, raising his glass with a smug grin. "Funny how life turns out," he said loudly, nodding toward her. Laughter followed, but what he didn't know was who really owned that room. Camilla Brooks had spent the last 2 years trying to disappear. No makeup, hair tied back, eyes on the floor. In this world of silk gowns and designer suits, she was invisible, and that's how she survived. She never expected to see Andrew Caldwell again, especially not here, especially not laughing, drink in hand with Madison Blake, the woman who once shattered her life. Camilla had one goal that night: finish her shift, collect her tip, and go home to Ryan, the only man who'd ever made her feel safe. But fate doesn't care about peace. Not when wounds are still fresh and pride still burns. Now, with Andrew's words slicing through the air like a knife, Camilla stands frozen between her past and the life she rebuilt in silence. This is the story of how she faced everything she thought she'd buried and found something no one expected. But that night, she had no idea what was coming. Camilla adjusted the collar of her uniform for the 3rd time in front of the staff mirror. Her hands trembled slightly. Not enough to be noticed by others, but enough for her to notice. Just another night, she whispered to herself. The Grand Lexington Hotel was hosting a major business summit, a glittering evening full of executives, politicians, and media. She'd worked dozens of these events. Nothing new, just keep your head down, smile, serve, disappear. But something felt different tonight. Her chest was tight, her breath shallow. Like her body knew something her mind refused to admit. 2 years ago, Camilla had walked away from a life that nearly erased her. Raised by her mother, a janitor who cleaned offices at night, she'd grown up believing that hard work and kindness were enough. Then she met Andrew Caldwell. He was charm in a tailored suit, ambitious, magnetic, dangerous in ways she didn't see until too late. At first, he praised her simplicity, her humility, said she grounded him. But as his status rose, so did his demands. He corrected the way she spoke, laughed at her dreams, compared her to women in his circle, women like Madison Blake. By the end, love had turned to silence, admiration to ridicule. And Camilla, once vibrant, became someone who barely spoke at all. After the divorce, she vanished from everyone's radar, took jobs that didn't require eye contact. The Lexington was the first place that gave her a chance without asking questions. Here, she could work, pay rent, heal quietly. She never told anyone about her past, not even Ryan. As she walked into the grand ballroom with a tray of flutes, the lights caught the edges of polished shoes and evening gowns. Laughter rippled through the air. She moved like a shadow, silent, efficient, invisible, until she looked up. Standing by the central bar, glass in hand, was Andrew. Older, yes, but still impossibly composed. And right beside him, in a red dress too perfect to ignore, was Madison Blake. Camilla's blood froze. Her fingers tightened around the tray. She had trained herself not to feel, not to flinch. But in that moment, everything she'd buried clawed its way back to the surface. And it was right then that everything began to unravel. There was a time when Camilla believed she had everything. She was 24, fresh out of a community college business program and working as a receptionist at a real estate firm when Andrew Caldwell walked in. He wasn't famous yet, not the multi-millionaire developer he'd later become, but he had that energy, that air of someone who expected the world to move for him. And when he looked at her, really looked at her, it felt like the world did. He invited her to lunch after 3 weeks of polite hellos. Their first date was at a rooftop bar she never could have afforded. He listened, asked about her dreams, told her he respected how she had built herself from the ground up. It was like stepping into a dream she didn't know she was allowed to have. Within a year, they were married. Camilla traded her small apartment for a high-rise penthouse. She left her job to support Andrew's ambitions, attending galas, planning charity events, keeping his world perfectly polished. For a while, she thought she belonged there. She decorated their home, cooked his favorite meals, smiled at the cameras when necessary. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, Andrew changed. He stopped asking about her day. He'd comment on how she dressed. Too plain, too modest. Not a good reflection. At parties, he spoke over her, corrected her stories, introduced her as just Camilla, never his wife. And then came Madison Blake. It started with late meetings, then weekends away for business. When Camilla finally asked, Andrew didn't even deny it. He just sighed, like she was being dramatic. "She's more in line with where I am now," he'd said. "You wouldn't understand." Camilla remembered staring at him, the words slicing deeper than any shout could. That night, she packed a single suitcase and left. No yelling, no final goodbye, just silence. She spent the next few months sleeping on her aunt's couch, applying for jobs that didn't call back, staring at ceilings, wondering what she'd done wrong. She thought about going back, apologizing. For what? She didn't even know. She still wore her wedding ring for weeks, like a ghost limb. She kept telling herself he'd change, that he'd realize what he'd lost, and for a long time, she still believed she could fix it. For the first time in her adult life, Camilla had no plan. After leaving Andrew, she drifted, day by day, week by week. She moved in with her aunt in a cramped apartment on the east side, sleeping on a futon in the corner of the living room, pretending she was just figuring things out. She wasn't. She avoided mirrors, didn't answer texts. Her phone was full of names she couldn't face. Friends from Andrew's world who'd quietly chosen his side. She spent hours scrolling through job sites, paralyzed. What do you put on a resume when you've spent the last 4 years pretending to smile beside a man who told you you weren't enough? Eventually, she found work cleaning rooms at a roadside motel. No uniform, no clock-in system, just cash in an envelope every Friday. The hours were long, the guests rude, the supervisor indifferent. But no one asked questions. That was worth more than anything. She cried in bathroom stalls. She stopped celebrating birthdays. She said, "I'm fine," so often that she forgot what it meant. Sometimes at night, she'd lie awake thinking maybe Andrew was right. Maybe she really was nothing special. Just another girl from nowhere who got too close to a world that was never hers. Then, one night, while working a late shift, she passed out in the hallway from exhaustion. A guest found her. The manager fired her the next morning for liability reasons. She sat on the curb with her last paycheck in hand, watching cars pass like they were part of another life. That same day, her aunt gave her an ultimatum: get steady work or find another place to stay. Camilla walked through the city aimlessly until she saw a "Help Wanted" sign taped to the side entrance of the Grand Lexington Hotel. Her first instinct was to keep walking. A place like that? It wasn't for people like her, but something made her stop. She walked in. The man at the staff desk was polite but firm. "What experience do you have in event support?" Camilla blinked. I'm good with people. I work hard. I don't take breaks. I don't cause problems." He stared at her for a moment, then handed her a clipboard. "You start Monday. Black slacks, black shirt, hair up, no jewelry." She almost cried, right there in the hallway. Weeks passed. The job wasn't easy, but it was steady. She learned how to move without being seen, how to anticipate needs before they were spoken. She became a part of the furniture, always present, never noticed. And then one morning, she met Ryan. He wasn't loud, wasn't flashy. He was just kind. He was filling in for the banquet manager that week. Most supervisors barely glanced at the staff. Ryan remembered names, asked if you'd eaten, noticed when your hands were shaking. Camilla tried to avoid him. But kindness, when you're used to cruelty, feels like sunlight on skin gone cold. He didn't ask about her past. He just showed up, again and again. A joke here, a coffee there. Eventually, a conversation that made her laugh without thinking. She didn't realize she'd let her guard down until one day he found her crying in the break room after a guest had insulted her. He didn't say much, just sat with her. That silence was the first thing in months that didn't feel like loneliness. She still had nightmares, still flinched when someone raised their voice, but slowly she began to breathe again. She didn't know where things with Ryan were going. She wasn't sure she was even ready, but she knew one thing. She didn't want to disappear anymore. And you? Have you ever felt like life was pushing you so far down you might not get back up? If you've ever stood at the edge of giving up, tell us in the comments. Sometimes your story can be the lifeline someone else needs to hold on just a little longer. You're not alone. More people have been there than you think. It was a Tuesday morning. Quiet, grey, unremarkable. Camilla was setting up the conference hall for a mid-level tech seminar, stacking bottled waters and aligning chairs like she always did. Her routine had become a kind of armor. Predictable, controlled, safe. Then Ryan walked in with 2 coffees. "Didn't see you at break," he said, placing one on the table beside her. "Thought you might need this." Camilla froze for a second. No one had brought her coffee since before everything. She managed a quiet, "Thanks," not meeting his eyes. "I read that book you mentioned," he added casually. "The one about resilience. You were right. Hits hard." She looked up, surprised. She didn't remember mentioning it to him. At least not clearly. He smiled. "You don't talk much, but when you do, you say things that stay." She stood there holding the coffee, unsure of what to do with the warmth in her chest. That night, she stayed late. After everyone left, she sat in the empty ballroom, lights dimmed, silence pressing in from the walls. She thought about how far she'd come, not in distance, but in quiet, invisible way. She no longer checked Andrew's name on social media. She no longer avoided her reflection. She no longer flinched when someone said her name out loud. She was still scared, still unsure, but for the first time in years, she wanted something again. Not revenge, not attention, just peace. A sense of self she didn't have to explain. And somehow, Ryan made her feel like that version of herself was already real. The next time he asked her to grab lunch after shift, she didn't panic. She said, yes. And when they sat outside, just 2 people eating sandwiches on the steps of a hotel no one knew they belonged to, she laughed. Not politely, not carefully. A real, free laugh. She didn't know if things would last, didn't dare think too far ahead. But that day, in that quiet moment with cold coffee and soft conversation, something shifted inside her. She didn't know if it would work, but for the first time, she wanted to try. Camilla didn't recognize the woman she was becoming. She'd started taking evening courses in hotel management, just 1 class at a time, paid in small installments. Ryan encouraged her, but never pressured. He celebrated every little win, like when she passed her first quiz or got invited to help coordinate a corporate event. At work, the staff began to notice her more. "She's sharp," someone said during a morning meeting. "She's fast," said another. She'd gone from someone who passed unnoticed to someone people listened to. On weekends, she and Ryan would walk through flea markets, make pancakes at noon, or sit on the fire escape with tea in hand, talking about nothing. He had a way of listening that made silence feel like a shared language. Then, quietly, they got married. No ceremony, no fanfare, just 2 signatures at City Hall and a dinner afterward. Fried chicken and pie. Camilla didn't post about it. She didn't tell anyone outside their small circle. Not because she was ashamed, but because this time she wanted to keep what was hers. Ryan was now managing the entire Lexington property. A few months later, the hotel changed ownership. What no one knew yet was that Ryan wasn't just the general manager anymore. He was now the majority owner. He didn't tell Camilla right away. Not out of secrecy, out of humility. "I didn't want you to think that's why I loved you," he said softly one night. She kissed his hand and whispered, "I never did." They were building a life, small, private, solid, and for the first time Camilla felt like she was growing roots in soil that wouldn't be pulled out from under her. But healing isn't a straight line. And no matter how far she came, there were days Camilla still felt like she didn't belong in the world she lived in. When the hotel announced it would be hosting a high-profile business gala for real estate leaders across the state, Camilla volunteered to help organize, out of instinct. But when she saw the guest list, her stomach dropped. Andrew Caldwell. Her name must have caught the wrong filter in the system. It wasn't sabotage, just irony. She stared at the email for 5 minutes, frozen. She could have asked to be reassigned. No one would question it. But something in her said no. She wouldn't run. Not again. In the weeks leading up to the event, her anxiety returned like a tide. She second-guessed every outfit, lost sleep, practiced fake smiles in the mirror. Ryan noticed. "Want to talk about it?" he asked one night. She shook her head. "Not yet." He didn't press. The day of the gala, she arrived early, checked every table twice, reviewed the staff rotations, polished silverware with shaking hands, and then the elevator dinged. She turned, and there he was, Andrew Caldwell. Same designer suit, same confidence, same eyes that once looked through her like she was furniture, but she was different now. Still, her heart pounded. Her skin went cold. Madison Blake stepped out beside him, all sharp heels and bright lipstick. They didn't notice her, not yet, but the universe had already set the stage, and every step from that point on would bring Camilla face to face with everything she thought she'd left behind. The ballroom was glowing, cameras flashed, waiters moved like clockwork. The string quartet played softly near the grand staircase, where guests were still arriving in waves of perfume and polished leather. Camilla stood near the back, clipboard in hand, giving last-minute directions to a server whose bow tie was crooked. She wasn't wearing a uniform tonight. Not technically, a simple black dress and flats. Still behind the scenes, but slightly more visible than usual. That was her compromise. She told herself that if she just kept moving, if she stayed busy enough, maybe Andrew wouldn't notice. But fate had a different plan. From across the room, she heard it. His voice, louder than necessary, performing, like always. "Funny," he said, swirling his drink. "Some people fall so low they end up working the events they used to attend." Camilla's spine locked. She turned her head just enough to see him, laughing with a circle of men in tailored suits. Madison by his side, pretending to be amused. Then he looked directly at her. "Camilla, is that you?" he called out, voice full of mock surprise. "Didn't recognize you without the heels and diamond earring." The group chuckled. Not all, but enough to sting. She felt her throat close, her vision blur. "Didn't you used to host these events with me?" he added, smirking. "Now look at you," someone whispered near her. "Is that his ex-wife?" Another. "Wow, this is awkward." Camilla tried to step back. Her breath was shallow. Her fingers dug into the clipboard. Every muscle in her body screamed to run, and then a voice rang out, calm, measured, firm. "That's enough." The music faltered. Conversations quieted. Ryan. He stood by the staircase, his presence quiet but commanding, eyes locked on Andrew. "Excuse me," Andrew scoffed. "You're in my hotel insulting my wife," Ryan said evenly. "That ends now." A wave of murmurs swept the room. Andrew blinked. "You're what?" Ryan stepped closer, every inch of him composed. "Camilla Brooks, my wife. The woman you just publicly humiliated." Silence. Andrew laughed nervously. "Wait, you married her?" Ryan didn't flinch. "I did, and I'd do it again 1,000 times." He turned to the crowd. "Let this be a reminder," he said, voice steady, "that status doesn't give anyone the right to belittle others. And that strength isn't always loud." A pause. "Sometimes it stands in the back of the room, doing its job with grace, until someone forces it to be seen." The room erupted in quiet applause, small at first, then growing. Andrew, red-faced, stammered something inaudible. Madison slowly stepped away from him, her smile long gone. Security appeared near the door, but they weren't needed. Andrew walked himself out. Camilla stood frozen, tears burning in her eyes, but not from shame, from something else, relief, recognition, vindication. Ryan walked toward her slowly. No theatrics, no anger, just love. He reached for her hand. "You okay?" he asked, voice low. Camilla nodded, barely able to breathe. "I am now." That night, long after the guests had gone and the lights had dimmed, Camilla stood alone in the now empty ballroom. She walked slowly through the space, fingertips brushing the edges of the tables she once nervously arranged. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. For years, she'd let shame shape her reflection. She thought silence meant safety, that invisibility was strength. But tonight, she had stood in the light and survived. More than that, she had reclaimed her name. She wasn't Andrew Caldwell's ex-wife anymore. She wasn't the girl who used to have it all and lost it. She was Camilla Brooks, a woman who had been broken, yes, but rebuilt herself without shortcuts. A woman who carried her past, but didn't let it define her. A woman who, when finally seen for who she really was, stood tall. Ryan joined her quietly, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You know," he whispered, "you didn't need me to fight for you." She smiled, leaning into him. "I know, but you did anyway." And maybe that was the real victory. Not the applause, not Andrew walking out humiliated, but the fact that she no longer saw herself as less than anyone else in the room. Because respect isn't given by wealth or status. It's earned by how you rise after they try to keep you down. Maybe you've been there too, quiet in a room where someone tried to make you feel small. Maybe you've worn a uniform and wondered if anyone saw the person inside it. Or maybe you've been the one who stood up when no one else did. If this story touched something in you, tell us in the comment. What part hit you the hardest? When Camilla stood her ground? When Ryan stepped in? Or when she realized she didn't need saving, just remembering who she was? Your voice matters. And someone out there might be waiting to read your words, just to believe they're not alone. If you believe respect should never depend on status, leave a like. And if you want to hear more stories about strength, redemption, and quiet courage, subscribe. Because we still have so many stories to tell. And maybe the next one will sound a little like yours.